Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Congressional Black Caucus Foundation virtual 2021 ALC discussion entitled A Celebration of Diverse, Powerful Women in News Media. My name is David Morgan, and I'm president of the Multicultural Media and Correspondence Association, a nonprofit leading a growing call to action to increase diverse media ownership. I invite you to view a brief video of our organization and our work. We see a media diversity crisis with serious economic, social, and political implications. 40% of the population have no ownership in an industry that represents 20% of the economy. Media bias and stereotyping is fanning the fire of hatred and division. Dying local news outlets are crippling civic engagement. And worst of all, not seeing positive stories about their community is stifling the dreams and aspirations of Black and brown children across this nation.
We hosted the inaugural Multicultural Media Correspondence Dinner to ignite a call to action to move the needle on media diversity.
We don't just tell colored stories. We tell stories in color.
During the dinner, we honored multicultural media luminaries who all shared their struggles and highlighted the need for increased media diversity.
Not enough to shore. It takes money, it takes capital.
It has to be multicultural. It has to be people coming together.
There's no way to create that culture of change without the authentic voices.
Stories of multicultural people have tremendous value.
In order to harness and sustain the energy and power of the MMCD, we formed the Multicultural Media Correspondence Association, and it quickly became a powerful platform. MMCA serves as a trusted bridge and convener, enabling difficult, solutions-focused conversations in a common ground environment. It serves as a vehicle to provide thought leadership. It effectively influences and communicates policy developments.
You have to just go at it as if you have the same rights that everyone else has to do what you need to do to fulfill your dream.
And it provides information and resources for both individuals and stakeholder organizations. Most notably, MMCA has worked with Representative Demings to introduce resolutions that reaffirms Congress's support for media diversity. We ask that journalists and media professionals join our community and become diversity champions, and that media companies and stakeholder groups become strategic partners by providing funding and support. Together, we can move the needle on media diversity. Thank you.
Today, I have the distinct honor of introducing our honorary host, Congresswoman Val Demings. But first, I'd like to thank our board and our many partners for their guidance and support. I particularly want to thank our corporate partners for this event, the Walt Disney Company in Bloomberg. I would also like to thank our congressional media diversity champions who are the true leaders of this media diversity effort and on whose shoulders we stand. Our honorary host, Congresswoman Val Demings, Democrat of Florida, the author of the recently adopted resolution reaffirming Congress's commitment to media diversity and chair of the Media Diversity Congressional Brain Trust, is that leader and champion. We could not be more pleased to pledge our fidelity and support for her efforts and to work with her to increase the level of diversity in media. Congresswoman Demings is a member of the Judiciary, Homeland Security, and Intelligence Committee. She is also a newsmaker. The Congresswoman went from being an impeachment manager to being on the VP shortlist and is currently the sole Democratic Senate candidate for the state of Florida. Please join me in welcoming Congresswoman Val Demings.
Well, let me say hello to everyone and welcome to the 2021 CBCF Annual Leadership Conference. I'd like to begin by thanking David Morgan and MMCA for your leadership and for your being a steadfast partner in our efforts to enhance and promote diversity in an industry that impacts our lives every day. The United States, as we all know, is a diverse nation with diverse people and diverse viewpoints. And if we have any chance of truly living up to our full potential as a nation, we must hear from and learn diverse perspectives and experiences. Every person in America, no matter their age, gender, zip code, or income, should be allowed to tell their stories and hear their stories in their voices and voices that sound like them. Yet, even as a nation, we have become more diverse. We have seen stagnation in representation in the media sector. At a time when social cohesion and citizen involvement is so needed, we must encourage media diversity. Failing to do so harms our society and our country. A lack of media diversity will not only further isolate marginalized communities, it threatens the democracy our framers sought to achieve. Over 50 years ago, the Kerner Report called for diverse hiring, expanded coverage of diverse stories, integration of coverage and content, and perhaps most importantly, it argued for the recognition of minority racial groups, not merely as tokenized individuals, but as fundamental building blocks of America, stating the painful process of readjustment that is required of the American news media must begin now. While we must acknowledge that even in recent years, we have made progress, our esteemed panel today is living proof of that progress. We still have much work to do. While we have seen more diverse faces on our TVs, in our newsrooms, our boardrooms, women at the very top of news organizations, advertising shops, the decision makers, there is much room for growth in the industry. My role as an elected official and public servant means that I must use my influence and my voice to shed a light on these issues and remove obstacles that prevent us from moving forward. That is why I have introduced a resolution recognizing the importance of media diversity in every Congress I have served, and why I founded the Media Diversity Congressional Brain Trust. I am so honored to have this esteemed panel joining us for this very important discussion this afternoon. And it is also my privilege to introduce the moderator of our panel, Harris Faulkner of Fox News Channel, whom I have had the opportunity and pleasure to interview with on several occasions. Harris Faulkner is a 6-time Emmy Award-winning anchor who currently anchors 2 top-rated daily programs, The Faulkner Focus and Outnumbered. She has also hosted numerous primetime specials focusing on a variety of current events, including America Together with Harris Faulkner, The Shot, which debunked myths surrounding COVID-19 vaccines, and made cable news history when she hosted a 2-hour virtual town hall with members of the White House Coronavirus Task Force. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to present our moderator for today's discussion, Harris Faulkner.
Congresswoman Demings, I am honored for your introduction and for your friendship, and also for your participation with programs that I've anchored as a journalist. Thank you for your kind words. You know, as we look where we're going, knowing where we've been is so important. So I want to kick things off by bragging a bit about all the women on the panel. And, you know, as we go along, we'll be able to talk more about Congresswoman Demings and from all of our perspectives, what she brings to the news cycle that I, and I'm sure the other panelists have experienced as well. So I can't wait to get into those details. But for now, let's meet Rashida Jones. Rashida is president of MSNBC. Did you hear what I said? She is the president of MSNBC. And with that development has so shaken the world of what is possible for women in this industry. She is modest, beautiful inside and out. Her bio says something quite, you know, more kind of digitally professional, but I'm telling you that from my heart. You're an inspiration. Thank you. And I'm glad to be here with you. She is the first Black executive to lead a major television news network. Previously, Rashida Jones served as senior vice president, NBC News and MSNBC, where she led cross-platform coverage, including the coronavirus pandemic, presidential debates, town halls, primaries, and more. Rashida has won an Emmy for coverage of the US Supreme Court's decision on same-sex marriage and executive produced the most watched Democratic presidential debate in history during the 2020 election cycle. We welcome her.
Thank you.
Also today, Marie Nelson, Senior Vice President, Integrated Content Strategy. Marie serves as the Senior Vice President, Integrated Content Strategy for ABC News. In the position, she leads the brand and reporting strategy for building multicultural audiences. So you are building those audiences that crush us with those ratings at times. Wow. Strengthening engagement between the network and viewers, readers, and listeners. Marie also collaborates with ABC News division leaders to develop senior level talent and employees which reflect ABC News's global audience. Prior to ABC, Marie Nelson was the vice president for news and independent film at PBS. I feel like we should be doing a rah-rah after all of these. I mean, I'm just so glad that we're together. All right, let's get started with that first question. Because where you've been informs your attitude about where you think you will go. Rashida, I'm going to start with you. From the beginning of your journey, those pivotal moments that got you to the launch point where you one day woke up and said, oh yeah, I'm going to get there. Talk to us about it.
Absolutely. And I appreciate the very warm welcome. It's such a delight to be with you guys today. You know, it's interesting to think back to that time because I think, you know, on some days I feel more comfortable, more excited about knowing exactly what's next than other days. And, you know, that kind of evolves as you go in your career. But I think about very clearly a moment where I came to New York and I came here with two small kids at the time. They were 4 and 7 at the time. Unsure of what this could lead to, unsure of how far my career would go beyond this, because I thought moving to New York, working for a network, that's kind of it. And it took those first couple of moves, and really it took other women, and especially other women of color like Yvette Miley, who I work with here, to say, no, this is just the beginning. If you think that this is the end game, this is actually the beginning of your trajectory. And you need to think bigger, you need to see bigger, you need to kind of grasp for goals that are bigger than what you're doing, but also see yourself, visualize yourself in those chairs, visualize yourself in those rooms. I remember sitting in this office now over 8 years ago, with the current president at the time thinking, I can't believe it, they're gonna hire me to come here. Never in a million years did I imagine I'd be sitting in that chair. And so for me, it really took other people seeing me there first.
Wow, you really, Rashida Jones, the woman I know, had a moment where she's like, I can't believe they're hiring me? Do you realize that was like one of the luckiest days of their lives?
Well, and the thing is, at the time, I didn't even know what that meant. I didn't know what the opportunities were. And I think part of it was because I didn't have a tremendous number of examples to point to say, oh, there's someone who looks like me who's doing a bigger job. There's someone who's had a similar life experience who has a job like this. There's a mom who has a job on this level. And so it took kind of getting here and peeling back some of the layers to realize the work that I'm doing is on par, if not in some cases, you know, as good, if not better than the work of my colleagues. And so if they imagine themselves there, why can't I?
Well, there are a lot of diversity points there. And, you know, it's not the color of your skin only. It's not only that you're a woman. It's not only whatever your age was at that time. But it's that you were a mother and that you have a point of view that is outside of the things that people may think they know about you.
Absolutely.
By looking at it.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things when I think about what I bring to this job, what I bring to decision making. It's all of those things together. You can't isolate any one of those things. I don't think with my mom's side of the brain one day and then my Black woman's side of the brain the other. Like, it's the totality of that experience that I think gives a different perspective, you know, that I can bring to the table than others.
Marie Nelson, I can't wait to hear about some of those pivotal moments that got you to your launch mode. Like, yeah, I'm on my way. Tell us.
Well, you know, I'm so blessed to be with all of you today. And it's funny because the thing that kept striking me just looking around and seeing your faces was going back to those early days and knowing that there were so few of these faces, especially in the places where I came up. And for me, media was actually my second career. I spent probably the first decade or so working in foreign policy. And so I had to make that hard turn when I made the decision that I wanted to pursue a career in journalism. And quite honestly, there was one person who made the difference for me. And this was another Black woman by the name of Lynn Adrian, who was a producer at ABC News. And I'd been put in contact with her, and I will never forget her because I had called and left a message, and maybe about a month later, I get this phone call back from her apologizing for not getting back to me sooner. And I would only later on come to know that she had been out because she'd lost her husband. And she was apologizing for not getting back to me sooner. And I had kind of given up, didn't think this was going to happen for me. And she said, I'm going to put you in touch with the person who manages all of the reporting coming out of this Washington Bureau. And you are going to call him. And as a matter of fact, if he answers, hang up the phone on him and keep calling until you get his voicemail. And when you get his voicemail, you are going to record in 30 seconds or less the best, most compelling message as to why he not only needs to call you back, but he needs to hire you to come to ABC News. She's like, and you're going to script it, and that's what you're going to do. And that's what I did. And so and he called me back within an hour of me leaving this message for him. And so that for me was how I kind of catapulted myself into this world. But I would say, in answer more directly to your question, you know, I didn't really know that I was going to have the type of career that I've ultimately had until I was actually at one of the lowest points. And that was when you know, I was a producer at Nightline and everything was changing. You know, Ted Koppel was leaving the show. They were changing the format. They were moving the team from Washington to New York. And so this was a real inflection point. And I didn't know what was going to come next. But a correspondent who I had worked with at Nightline turned to me, Michelle Martin, and she said, I just got a call from NPR and they want me to develop a new daily talk show for National Public Radio. And I told them the only way that I'll go is if they will hire you to be my executive producer. And so I went from being a producer to being an executive producer overnight. And talk about a leap. Oh. But it was in that moment of like having to completely reframe and refocus and realize that somebody believed so much in me that she would stake her career and her opportunity for us to do it together. And for me, it's ever since then I've tried to just continue to allow myself to believe in the value of what we bring every single day.
Wow, I realize what a gift it is to be here today, to hear these stories. It's important. We need to tell each other where we've been and how we got there. And I hope that people watching really take all this in, because I think it does take all of us. We may not all be in the same room or on the same phone call, but it does. It takes the steps of each and every one of us. I have two quick follows for you. Did you hang up on that man?
Oh, I certainly did.
That was amazing.
But he give that kind of advice, like, you hang up on that individual until you get their voicemail so you can talk without interruption. Like, I love that.
I soon found out that like very few people in the building, I think only the bureau chief had an assistant. So everybody answered their own phones. It's like, I was like, hopefully he takes a lunch break or something.
To even do that. That is amazing. And you know, my next follow-up for you is, you never once, and Rashida didn't do it really more than once either. We don't point to those things that people see from the outside about how we got there. I mean, the things that Linda, I think her name was, as you were talking, and that Michelle Martin saw, that the things that people saw in you along the way, they weren't looking at this. They were thinking, I want to win. Where is Marie Nelson? And Marie, hang up on this guy until you get his voicemail so you can tell him everything that I want you to tell him so he doesn't cut you off. Now, some of that is about being a woman though, right?
That's right.
Well, the times that I've interviewed with powerful men, they will cut you off.
They certainly will cut you off. But you know, I mean, think about the time that we were coming up in this news organization, right? That was right on the cusp when all of a sudden it went from, you know, very few women in general around the editorial table to what you see now, where the majority of our news organization is actually women, except for when you start to get into you know, the higher executive ranks. But back then you had to kind of understand how to navigate and how to negotiate power in that environment. Yeah. And that was, and it was challenging. It was very challenging figuring out the best way to have a voice and to know that at the end of the day, you weren't just talking, but you were actually being heard. Mm-hmm. And so that's the thing, I think, when I think back on that time, that I want people, and when I'm in my newsroom now, I'm so encouraged because, you know, this is a generation of people who expect to be heard.
Oh,
you know,
oh my,
changed so much.
Talk to my 14-year-old. She wants undivided attention. So, you know, I always think in terms of connective tissue and how we go from one thing to the next. Because basically what we do in news is old-fashioned bedtime storytelling. And for those of us who spent much of their career in prime time, mine in local news, but whatever, that's what you're essentially doing. And in Minnesota, I certainly felt like I was putting people to sleep because it snowed 10 months out of the year and everybody was inside napping. So, I mean, I was like, it really felt like that. So the connection point that I see right now with Congresswoman Demings is that right before we got on the Zoom, Congresswoman, you said something that I want to share now. And that is that, you know, as women, as Black women, as moms, as perennially singles, as I was for 4 decades, whatever our status is that society looks upon us, we're constantly looking to find and possess a place that is meant for us. And it can be that journey that brings along the greatest lessons for us, but lessons to share. So now I pose the question to you. And we kind of know a little bit about where you'll take us. And that is, you know, how did you know it was launch time for Val Demings without the titles, without all of that, without all of the experience yet?
Well, Harris, thank you so much for the question. And look, I could just listen to you, Rashida, and Marie all day because, you know, as each one of you talked, I'm like making notes. No, I need to go from that angle. Or no, that's me. Or no, that's me. But I think, Harris, you said something that was so important, that we are Black women. But one thing that I learned a long time ago, and that was from my mother, a woman who did not finish high school, a woman who cleaned houses for a living. And what she taught me and my 6 siblings was to not allow society to define us by the color of our skin, to help them to see that we're so much more, right? I served as a woman police chief, who the first woman to serve in that position, a police chief, who just happened to have been a Black woman. I serve in the U.S. House of Representatives right now on some pretty powerful committees, doing some, I believe, some critical work, who just happens to be a Black woman. And so I think it's so important that a couple of things, that we have the courage and the ability to get out of our comfort zone and to not settle and allow the world to keep us in a certain place because that's where women are or Black women are. And the other thing is to believe in ourselves. And one of the things Marie talked about with her mentor was that she was able to see such greatness in her. And I can remember in my own life, you know, people saw me at certain places long before I had the ability to see myself in those places. And so when I was appointed police chief, I said, oh, okay, you know, the sky is the limit. Maybe I will allow myself to live up to my full potential. And it's not so much a lot of times what other people think about you, but it's really what you think about yourself and where you see yourself in that space. Can I be in that space even when we have not seen others in that space who look like us?
Exactly.
We have to blaze the trail and see ourselves in that space. And so it's been an amazing journey for me.
Wow, so many touch points there. I mean, Rashida, are you, as you listen to the Congresswoman and to Marie, are you gleaning some just nuggets along the way of like, yeah, I remember that time and it was kind of like that?
So there's the commonality of for each of us having an experience where maybe someone else saw it in us before we saw it in ourselves. Yeah. And I think that's important, not only, I think to my younger self or my earlier career self, like, I wish you would have thought of yourself to be in those rooms, in those positions, around those tables, but I'm glad I had people who felt it for me and pushed me there. So that's number one. Number two, and this is something that I heard a couple of times that I think is important. None of us are in the roles or jobs that we're in because of the color of our skin, but we're also allowed to be who we are in those jobs. I am, you know, allowed, so to speak, to be all of the pieces that define me in the job that I'm in. I feel a responsibility to show up as my whole self. I feel a responsibility when there is something that I feel as a Black woman to put that on the table. I don't shy away from the fact, newsflash, I am a Black woman. I am a mom. I was, you know, raised and lived primarily in the South for most of my career. All of those things kind of color who we are and how we make decisions and how we consume information and content. And I think it's as equally important for us to shatter these limitations that maybe other people may perceive or put on us, but it's also equally important when we show up in these roles and we're setting examples and we're making history in some cases, that we have to be comfortable with being everything that we are, including our race, our age, our gender. All of those things are important to represent.
Well, and you know, Marie, just to further what Rashida has said, I'll throw in a nugget from my experience. I grew up military. My dad was a fighter pilot, combat pilot in Vietnam for 2 tours, retired lieutenant colonel, and passed away December 25 at the height of the pandemic, 2020. And I was raised to know that if you are in the mission, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. Exactly what Rashida was saying. And while I may not have always been able to glimpse the places, the things, the positions that people could forecast for me, I was always present in them and always ready to win the mission, always ready for victory and to learn from defeat. And that really doesn't have anything to do with the boxes that people would check, but I will be very transparent about this. Sometimes those boxes were a headwind against me. And what I was accomplishing was in spite of it all. How about you?
Well, first of all, have my sympathy.
Thank you.
I lost my father a few years ago, and
thank you.
So
I'm sorry for
you know. You know the expression, life for me ain't been no crystal stair.
Oh, yeah.
I crawled over a lot of broken glass, My family came back to this country. My parents were educated in the United States. That's how I was met. That's how they met. And I was born in the United States, but they very soon went back home. And I grew up in Liberia, and would not have had this flat Maryland accent if it weren't for the fact that my family.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if Liberia had moved to DC.
Indeed, indeed. Well, it actually has, and it's all because of my mom, in truth.
I like it.
But you know, there was a military coup that happened there, and so my family came here as political refugees, and so every single thing that I have experienced in this life has been influenced and impacted by that moment in time. And the thing that it taught me always was that, number one, family first, but beyond that, there's no excuses. Just don't exist in my family. My mother, you know, completely transformed her career. She had been a woman who had come to the United States, wanted one day to be Secretary of Health. She wanted to be, you know, had been on the faculty at Howard Medical School. And then she came back to this country, and we lived in a house in the suburbs with 26 people until all the men had been freed from political prisons. You know, and she was the one who got all of those people here. So she's like our family Harriet Tubman. So when you come out of that type of experience, that, you know, that you always have to be ready. You know, in my life working in foreign policy, I remember one of the greatest gifts I was ever given was having the chance to work for Reverend Jackson when he was President Clinton's envoy to Africa. And, you know, in the course of that time, one of the things, one day he turned to me, and he used to call me Dr. Nelson. He said, "Dr. Nelson," he said, he was watching the news, and we were involved in Kosovo at the time, and the POWs were there. He's like, "Dr. Nelson, we're going to go and we're going to bring our boys home." And he's like, "And you're going to figure out how we're going to do that." You know, I think I was maybe, you know, 24 years old at the time, something like that. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, there are all those inflection points, those moments where you have to figure out a way out of no way, where there's just excuses are just not acceptable. And when you fast track all the way throughout, and even in this moment now, you know, in the work that I do now, you know, you hear people tell you things all the time. Oh, you know, you're working on growing culturally diverse audiences. You know, those audiences aren't interested in news. You know, you hear all the, you know, what you're trying to do is impossible. So if you would feel so defeated if you hadn't had all of that life's preparation that basically says to you, nope, game on. This is just the next challenge. You know, and that's what I always try to communicate to the folks who are coming up.
I want to talk a little bit, and Congresswoman Demings, if you'll just allow me to, I want to go back to Rashida Jones, and I'll come back with you, Congresswoman, because I want to keep it in the wheelhouse of news right now. Rashida, as I'm listening to Marie in those last few moments, boy, they assume a lot about us as viewers, don't they? They, I don't even know who they are.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that's kind of interesting. And by way of assuming a lot about us as viewers, as people, as whatever, it allows those of us who can see the world bigger than that to really be valuable in a room, because we don't look at ourselves as monolithic.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, look at the folks who, you know, we have on the panel today. We all come from very different backgrounds. We all come from very different life experiences. We all speak to very different audiences. And so I think one of the things that's important, I would say, for the content creators to understand, and we're among them, is you're not only talking to one audience, or there's not one definition of what your audience is. And I think, you know, at least from my perspective, when I think about content, I'm not targeting a specific demographic, a specific age, a specific, you know, kind of experience. It's got to be broader than that. And I think even just, again, looking at the work that we do, we work one block away from each other. We talk to different audiences.
We go to the same hairdresser, but her hair is
we do. This is why we're in sync, you know. But I think it's important that we're talking to a wide range of people, because I think any community doesn't want to only be told one thing in one way. They don't want to be told what to think or how to think. And I think that's one of the things we have to be comfortable about. When I say like bringing your whole self to the table, it's bringing every single part of you, because there might be things that people assume your community, your demographic, your age group, your race want to hear. But when you think about the reality of your life experience, it's broader than that.
So now, Congresswoman, I'm coming to you to bring us home on this track that we're on. And I want to do it in this way. former military background for me as a kid. For you, our law enforcement is kind of similar. Right now, 20% of our law enforcement across the country are former military. It's a very male environment when you entered. It is changing, and really in the last 10 years, changing rapidly. But when you enter the workforce, I see you as a pebble in the lake that causes a ripple. And there were so few like you, women, strong women. I mean, I don't know you in your personal life, but I bet you're just like this, Congresswoman Demings. I'll bet that you're always taking in all the information because I've interviewed you before. I know you to be that way. And you're really listening. Something great to take to leadership in law enforcement. What was it like to be among those first women in the department or departments that you were first exposed to? And how do you think you made a difference?
Well, Harris, the first couple of women were actually hired at the Orlando Police Department in the 1940s, but they were not allowed to do actual police work until 1972.
Well, what did they do every day?
They were babysitting lost children, maybe writing parking tickets.
Okay.
They weren't allowed to carry guns or really do the job that they were hired to do until 1972. I was hired in 1984. And it was the first time really that the agency had gotten serious about hiring women. There were like 8 women in our class, which was a really big deal. And you could still see, even during that time and during my career, the agency wasn't quite sure what to do with us. I remember I had a colleague who, she and her husband, they got pregnant, and the agency didn't know whether to keep her in a uniform on the street or whether to pull her off the street. I can remember images of her being out on the street directing traffic in a larger size police uniform with a gun belt around her tummy.
Oh my God.
And I say that to say that's been in my career as a law enforcement officer, so it has not been that long ago. And so, Harris, I can remember, people just really not quite knowing some of the people I rode with and served as their partner, really not quite knowing what to do with us. And women, we still found ourselves trying to prove ourselves that we could be as tough as the guys on the street, but that we were better actually at using our best weapon. And that's the weapon that God gave us, and that's our brain. I remember when I was appointed chief of police in 2007, and men and women would say to me after congratulating me, they would say, well, that's a tough job.
Oh, you know.
That's a tough job.
Yeah, wow.
And that's a tough job. And I finally said, okay. I said to them, well, you know what? It is a tough job, but it's always been a tough job. The job didn't get any tougher because a woman is now leading the agency. And so what we have to do, as I said earlier, we cannot just get caught up on what the world is doing or what the world thinks, and really trying to prove ourselves. We have to believe that we brought the talent, the skills, and the ability to the job in the first place, and not be afraid to do what needs to be done. Women make great leaders. I think that women are like great quarterbacks. We have the ability to see the entire field. We aren't afraid to get opinions from other people and then factor those opinions into our final decisions. We're certainly not afraid to make good, tough decisions. We do it at home and in the workplace every day. We aren't threatened by working as a team and giving credit to other people. I know that women make great leaders because I've seen it. I see it today in this session, but we have to believe that women make great leaders.
I love that.
There were so many gems in there. I just wrote down everything.
I know, right?
That was great.
What did you get, Marie? What gem did you get?
It's funny because I kept thinking to myself when she said we have to believe it, and I kept thinking I I too, Harris, I'm one of those crazy people who decided to get married later in life and have kids later in life. So I have twin toddlers. They just turned 3.
I love it.
That's exciting.
Congratulations, Mama.
And I just kept thinking to myself, we have to believe it, because if we don't, we can't teach them.
Oh yeah.
You know, we can't. And for me, that's the game changer. That's the game changers when they go through their own experience and they walk in that door with that sense of confidence and that sense of belief. And it doesn't have to be, you know, instilled in them outside of themselves, you know. And I look forward to that. And I know that that's possible. I know that that's what's coming.
Yeah, we have to believe it, because if we don't believe it, we can't teach them. Rashida, I want to get into what real diversity is and how we look as leaders in the environments in which we are to change both the conversation, and I'm all for changing conversation, but it has to have action-oriented benefits behind it. Mm-hmm. Like I love all the woke talk and all that about all the things that we're going to do. But when you walk into a workplace, how do you ensure that it's actually going to be better? Like I don't wear message t-shirts unless they have my own message, make my own show name on them.
Right.
But I do look for something beyond the messaging. And I wonder, as a leader, as you broaden out the space that you're in, what are you looking to do? What do you observe and say, I'm going to fix that?
Yeah, so I think, you know, when we talk about diversity here, it's not just race, it's not just gender, but it's also, and I think we put more focus on diversity of thought. It's diversity of geography, it's diversity of perspective. And so one of the things that as a leader I lean into is not only are we representing many different characteristics from many different people, but when you roll it up, who are the people who are actually making decisions? Because what it is and what diversity isn't is being able to point to one show or one segment or one story or one guest and saying, all right, box check, we're diverse. It's the totality of what we're doing. It's the totality of the different perspectives that are part of the decision making. It's the, how did we get to this story even coming to the forefront? Is it because someone who maybe doesn't look or think the way that I do brought it up? It's more kind of the, you know, it's not a quick thing. It's not, if we've hired X number of people, we're, you know, being diverse and inclusive and whatnot. It's the totality of all of those things together. And so some of it may be represented in, from a gender standpoint, do we have enough balance in the decision-making positions? From a race standpoint, do we have enough balance? But it's not just who's in those chairs, it's how it shows up in all of our content.
Marie, one thing I would add to that I look for as a leader in my space is whether or not people who come with diversity and thought and point of view have a seat at the table. Because it's not enough to check the boxes of the outside things that people can see about us. By the way, I can't change the way I look. So I come into the room as a Black woman who's really tall and had the audacity to wear 6-inch Louboutins. So I'm like 6 foot.
Because why not?
Because why not?
Of course.
You know, but then when I arrive, I do want people to really respect the fact that I want all opinions and points of view and diversity of thought in the room. Like, don't just throw me things in my direction that you think I want to hear, because I guarantee you can't read my mind. And if you did, you would put that book down unless you agreed with it, because I'm going to debate everything. But I don't know that we look for that enough. What do you think?
I think we don't look for it enough, you know, and I think part of it is because of, you know, this conversation around diversity is so mired in a difficult conversation that we just, you know, when, you know, especially when we're talking about issues of race, right? Because we're stuck, but, and then this goes across all forms of diversity. We're stuck in this place where, you know, we think about this in terms of, you know, a very defensive way of thinking about diversity, you know, instead of, you know, it's how can we make sure that we have accounted for X, You know, how can we make sure we've checked this box? How can we make sure that we've set up all of these defensive measures so that no one can come and say that we aren't living up to it? You know, it's about what we should do, you know, as though you're somehow needing to be compelled toward it, instead of this actually being that thing that is the game changer, that thing that grows our businesses, that thing that makes us reach wider audiences, that thing that is more compelling just across the board. Like, this should be an offensive strategy, you know, and if you're thinking like that, then you are showing up very, very differently. You are wanting every single person represented, whether it's about thought or identity or what have you. You're wanting all those voices at the table. And I will quote a colleague, Yvette Wiley, because we were having this conversation a few months ago, and she was talking about how she approaches her work. She's like, you know, I'm not just showing up, you know, to deal with diversity around the edges. She's like, we have got to be here to change the game.
Ooh.
You know, you've got to be here to change the game. And the way that you do that is by doing all those feeder things that are going to make it such that when you are going out with the job, that you're going to have the type of pool that you want to draw from. You know, that's changing the game.
Yes.
You know?
That is so important. That is so important, because as you look to build up the ranks with diversity from every, you know, walk of life, LGBT, you know, whatever it is, I'm looking for diversity in thought. I pay so much attention to the questions that people ask who are interviewing to be on my teams. When you're doing all of that, you're absolutely right. Sometimes you don't get enough diversity in the candidates, and you can't figure out why that is. It's because your net isn't big enough. Like the thing that you've told the people who are helping you to look, the things that you've instructed them, they're looking for those things, but they're not broadening out the net enough to find them in people who may look differently than what they are looking for. Oh, I love it. You preached so hard, you broke that mic, and I got hit by all shards of it.
I'll add one quick thing to that, to something we talked about in the beginning.
Yeah.
We also don't have enough people who know to be in our universe and on our radar, or who feel confident to do so. You know what I mean? Like, when you think about early career employees, you know, who may think, I'm not good enough to work for a network like this. Like, those are the people that we also need to be encouraging and grooming and growing and casting that wide net. So in the same way that there were points in our careers where we didn't necessarily see ourselves in these big spaces, we need to be doing the same for that younger pool that will then become the diverse net that we're looking for.
So I know we only have a couple of minutes left. Our team has let us know that on the live chat. But Congresswoman Demings, I want to quickly just talk with you about one thing, kind of encompassing everything that everybody's brought together, how we go forward in this conversation about diversity.
Harris, thank you so much. And what a powerful discussion. We have to do it again. I think we start here with where we ultimately want to end up. And that is a greater, stronger, better nation. And I don't think we get there without understanding that we do come from different places, Rashida. We have different backgrounds. We speak to different audiences. But ultimately, what we want to be is to live up to our full potential and see others do the same. Marie, thank you for saying we've got to be there. We've got to believe it. We've got to believe in ourselves so we can be there for them. You know, everything that we are, we have persons of all races, boys and girls who are watching and listening, who are trying to find their place and their space. And so diversity, having those diverse voices, diverse backgrounds, diverse perspectives should not be a challenge to us, but we should welcome it because it does make us stronger. And that's the nation. That is the beautiful, powerful nation that we were created to be, even when we disagree. We should not be afraid of those very spirited discussions, because ultimately, I believe it helps us get to that place where we need to be. And so I just want to thank you for what you do every day in your respective places. I thank you to those who have tuned in, Rashida, to Marie Harris. You've been an absolutely wonderful moderator, and boy, this panel has been just outstanding. I look forward to the next time. Thank you all so much.